coming out on a sunny, sunny day in late. Can you hear me all right with this? Okay, I have a soft voice. I'm going to basically teach a bit of a class. Some of my students are here, my students are on the panel, some of them are very accomplished memoirists. And so I see many of you have paper and pencil, so I'm going to hand out something that was on a Random House blog this week. 10 tips to writing successful memoir. Sir, if you could do the honors of passing that out. Those are gleaned from 30 years of teaching. I'm very grateful to Sasquatch for getting my 30 years of teaching on the page. And my wonderful literary agent, Sarah Fryman, getting her wisdom about publishing on the page. So let me just ask a quick question. How many of you want to publish traditionally? Okay, how many of you are thinking of doing a legacy memoir, something that you would like to have in beautiful form as self-publishing? Okay, that helps me kind of navigate and also the planning. What I'd like to do is just read you a little bit of the beginning and teach you two things. One, how to create a character of the self on the page. In other words, showing up on the page. And the other is one scene that explains your whole life. And I'm going to give you examples of this and also basically teach you as if you were my class. And then we're going to turn to the panel and you can ask all of your questions. And if you don't have questions, we will ask each other questions. Because this is going to be on YouTube and I want it to be broadcast in such a way that everyone here can share it with others and we can also share it on our websites. Thank you, sir, for doing that. So this is the very beginning of the book, and it is something we crafted, Sarah and I. It took us 6 months to do the proposal. It almost took as long to do the proposal as to write a book. A memoir is like a love story, with all the ecstasies, disappointments, and turning points of any relationship. And at the end, you might be surprised to discover that the love of your life is your life. The love of your life is your life. Your memoir will open doorways to yourself and the world, to acceptance, awareness, and fulfillment. In memoir, we come home to ourselves and ultimately realize that life makes sense. And with this realization often comes the happiness of true understanding. You have to ask yourself this question. Write it down. Who am I in this story? Who am I in this story of healing, of going to India, of working with an autistic brother and surviving, of dealing with people in hospice? Who am I in this story? And if you can ask yourself that question and answer it, you've already begun to shape a characterization of the self on the page. Second writing prompt, for those of you who have your notebooks out, which I love to see, is to answer this question. I did not realize that I was a blank, comma, and blank child. I did not realize that I was a blank, comma, and blank child. And when you answer that question, you will understand a lot more about yourself. Do it as a child, do it as a teenager, do it as an elder, do it as a mature narrator. I want to say a few words about the mature narrator. There is a commute in a memoir between the older self, no matter if you're 18 or 80, and the younger self, either in childhood or at any other place in your life that you are going back to. So that is a commute between more wisdom and a younger self who may have not gotten it yet. So if you look on the back of your handout, you'll see that Oprah chose very well from this book some writing prompts. And the one that I really love is, after my experiences with loss, sickness, broken heart, abuse, betrayal, I finally got it. I recognized that I learned most when I was blank. Fill in that blank and you will have the beginnings of the epiphany and theme of your entire narrative arc. So these are some writing prompts to help you. And another one I want, and it's something that I always assign to my students, it is to, actually, why don't you just do this? Close your eyes and imagine a scene, which if someone said to you, give me one scene that explains your whole life, what you would come up with. You're only allowed one scene for your whole life. Do you know what that scene would be? We've done this in class. It's incredibly fruitful for those of you who are doing memoir and telling your life story. When I did this exercise along with my students, I suddenly had a scene that I never thought that I would write about, ever, because it was dangerous. It was dangerous because I would have to write about religion, which, you know, was never fun, because all these people believe different things. Dangerous because I knew I would have to write about my family, which is really difficult. And dangerous because I didn't know where it would take me. And what you find in a life story is that the encounter with the memoir changes you. Your stories will change you. So this is what I got. It's from I Want to Be Left Behind, my memoir that she was talking about. And it's sitting on the beach doing something called seal sitting. How many of you have heard of seal sitting? Yes. I started that in 2007, where we sit on the beach with seals, call it daycare for seal pups, when the mothers are out fishing, or when they just are yearlings and need a rest, or they're being weaned and need to rest. And I was sitting there with my neighbor George, who's a wonderful seal sitter, and never before had he proselytized me. And suddenly he turned to me and said, you know, the countdown for the rapture has begun. And I went, oh boy, I got 4 hours with this guy. This is going to ruin the neighborhood. This is going to ruin our friendship. I never want to seal sit with him again. I had this my entire life. And now, look what I have to deal with. I thought if I moved to the Northwest, I'd get away from the Southern Baptists, but I did not. So, at the very end, we're a little worried about the pup. And all of a sudden, the pup looks up as if called. We couldn't hear anything. George says, any time now, he said, the mother will return, just like Christ. That's my favorite part. And then I understood something about my neighbor and about myself. All of us know what it feels like to wait for someone to call, to finally come home, to recognize our love, to reunite with those of us who long for something more, something greater than ourselves. Maybe it will come in the night, in that twinkling of an eye. Maybe it will save us from a lonely beach. As if in answer to our longing, a glossy head popped up far out in the waves. The seal pirouetted to find her pup on the beach. George and I sat absolutely still, hardly breathing. A soft cooing call from the mother. The pup fairly leapt up, flippers unfurling like wings, flop, 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 and then an undulant body hop along beach stones as the pup inched toward the surf. Ah, you're safe now, buddy, George sighed, as the seal pup slipped into the waves and swam as fast as his tiny flippers could carry him back to his mother. There was tranquility in George's face, a sweet calm that often comes from sitting on the beach all day with nothing to do but watch over a fellow creature. From our driftwood seal seat, we saw the two seals dive and mother and pup disappear into the waves. I turned to George, really happy, and said, George, you're a really good neighbor. We would miss you all so much if you just zipped up to heaven. We'd say, well, there goes the neighborhood. George took the compliment in stride. Along with seal sitting, he also participates in our neighborhood block watch. He is someone I might call upon in an emergency, unless, of course, that emergency was the rapture. I'll miss you, George admitted, and all of this, too. You know, George, I said softly, I really want to be left behind. He looked at me thoughtfully and then fell quiet as we watched another harlequin float past, bright beak dipping a tiny fish, happy, so happy in this moment. The great blue cawed hoarsely and stood on one leg in a fishing meditation. We sat in silence, listening to waves more ancient than our young, hasty species, more forgiving than our religions, more enduring. Rapture. So that was one scene that explained my whole life. And when I wrote it, I knew that I had something that would go on and perhaps become a book. And I called Sarah Jane and I sent it to her and she said, now you have to write the true story of Duck and Cover. Now you have to write another memoir. So now I would love to turn to my beloved students and my panel. We're going to answer your questions and maybe even discuss among ourselves secret things, secret history. Okay, so any questions? Surely you have questions.